started. They'll all come out in about 30 seconds, coming from that side. Yep, we are going to get underway in just a few seconds here, talking about the 9 civil complaints filed against Arlington Heights School District 25, 2 administrators, and a former school nurse. The legal team will be in momentarily. Come on up. Okay, everyone, let's get underway. My name is Jennifer McGuffin. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the law firm of Romanucci and Blandin. We are here today to discuss 9 civil filings against Arlington Heights School District 25, 2 administrators, and the former school nurse. You will be hearing from partner Michael Holden, partner Michael Sarasa, and I also want to acknowledge our managing and senior partner, Gina DeBoni, who has been instrumental in this case and unable to be here today. And before we get underway, I also want to acknowledge several members of our legal team who have also been key contributors. Senior paralegal and team lead Dana Condos, senior team lead and paralegal Lucy Gonzalez, and paralegal Melinda Chacon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Arlington Heights School District 25 utterly failed to support medically vulnerable children by allowing a school nurse to act with impunity when she failed to provide the children's proper prescription medication and controlled substance medication during school hours. Instead of being a trusted support person as the students learn and grow, Westgate Elementary School nurse Tory Eitz instead did real and future harm to 9 children and disrupted their health, education, and sense of trust and security, while her employer, Arlington Heights School District 25, Principal Ann Buck, and then Superintendent Kaye, had sufficient notice and ability to stop her, and chose not to. These reckless behaviors and decisions not to intervene have destroyed these children's trust in authority figures and healthcare providers, disrupted their social emotional learning in school, resulted in missed educational opportunities, diminished their self-worth and self-confidence from out-of-routine write-ups and removal from classrooms, disrupted their medical treatment, often including increased dosage of medication because the perception was that the current dose wasn't working, and disrupted the family dynamic. Today, Romanucci and Blandin announces filing of 9 lawsuits seeking to hold those responsible accountable for the harm caused to these children, including the nurse, who has since been fired and criminally charged, District 25, Westgate Elementary Principal Ann Buck, and then Superintendent Kaye. Kaye is now the District 25 Superintendent. Now some background behind the case. During the times detailed in the civil complaint, 2021 through 2024, Tory Eitz was the school nurse at Westgate Elementary School in Arlington Heights, Illinois, where, among other duties, she was responsible for dispensing student medication during the school day. This procedure is described in detail in the District 25 handbook and explains how medication is supposed to be cataloged for each student, Written records are to be kept, and signatures provided when medication is distributed and taken. The nurse is expected to maintain a precise count of medication used and remaining. Nurse Eitz abused and manipulated the relationships with parents who entrusted their children to her care, telling parents medicine was missing, fell down the sink, was dropped on the floor, or for some other reason was miscounted, and that she needed more. Often asking parents to meet her in the parking lot of the school to provide the medication directly to her. Many of these prescriptions were controlled substances. Also, in some circumstances, signatures on medication logs did not match those of the parents. And eventually, a parent expressed concern. After this all came to light in April of 2024, Brian Kaye, in a text message to one of the parents, admitted to having prior notice of concerns with Tory Eitz. But despite this, no action was taken to investigate, report, or terminate this behavior, putting the safety of all the children in District 25 at risk. The evidence now points to the conclusion that Nurse Eitz stole medication from students and replaced the missing medication with non-prescription medications such as aspirin, in direct violation of doctors' orders for these children and in direct violation of the children's best interests. In one case, a young student tested positive for fentanyl, as details of this scam became clear. During the course of our civil investigation, we learned that District 25 administrators and school officials knew of improper administration of medication, missing medication, and the failure to follow protocols when that medication went missing. This knowledge goes back as far as November 2021 with a written communication from a parent. You can see some of the examples of their notice in the complaint, as well as the posters we've provided here. Defendants Ann Buck and Brian Kaye were aware of the concerns that Eitz was breaching her trust with the students and the families as a medical professional working as a school nurse for District 25. Eitz should have been reported and terminated at the time of the first parent report. We believe the evidence is a clear indication of District 25's notice and active complicity in Tory Eitz's actions. The district's willful and reckless actions put the well-being and safety of many children at risk, and the administration's failure to take accountability then and now is both stunning and deeply disappointing. When parents were finally informed of the situation by the school in April of 2024, the community connected the dots and the outrage and calls for accountability began. The district then stonewalled Romanucci and Blandin's efforts on the family's behalf to secure information through the Freedom of Information Act requests, ultimately leading to our firm having to file an appeal with the Illinois Attorney General's office to intervene. District 25 has since terminated the employment of Tory Eitz for her gross misconduct, including substituting and/or switching students' medications that were stored at Westgate Elementary School. Further, when Brian Kaye and Ann Buck learned of the actions of Tory Eitz, they did not report the concerns as they were required to under the Illinois Abused and Neglected Child Reporting Act. Each of the individual defendants named in these civil actions are mandatory reporters given their professional roles under the Act. Now, our client families share heart-wrenching stories about the harms done to their children by the action of Eitz and the complicity of District 25. They call Eitz a predator. These parents explain in detail the harsh realities that these kids were forced to learn at such a young age. Realities about drugs and addiction, and that some people hurt others for their own benefit. And that sometimes those people are nurses or authority figures. Also painful is that these children are learning that the people who had the highest level of responsibility for their safety had all the notice they needed to take action and instead chose not to. This includes District 25 Board of Education, who did not hold their school leaders accountable. Other families detail feelings of betrayals, having known Tory Eitz for years and trusted their children to her care, only now to see her manipulation as sinister. They saw their child's academic scores plummet, while their child's behavior became erratic and troubling, leading to more doctor's appointments and eventually tests showing potential fentanyl exposure. The anger they feel at the school district that was responsible for keeping a safe environment and for advocating for their children is, quote, earth-shattering, end quote. Other parents report that their child is now extremely fearful to ever go back to the nurse's office again, and they carry their own Band-Aids in their backpack in case they get hurt to avoid having to go to the nurse's office. Many of our parents say they moved to District 25 to secure a safer, brighter future for their children. And due to the alleged criminal actions of one and the cowardice of many, these families' experiences have been horrific. Their children have nightmares and extreme anxiety about how doctor's appointments and being at school. The parents add that those who abuse innocent children are the lowest members of society, and those that cover it up are just as bad, perhaps worse. The administration knew the difference between right and wrong, but chose to enable Tory Eitz instead of protecting the kids they were entrusted to protect. I'd now like to introduce partner Mike Sarasa, who will discuss the overall complaint and the claims against Nurse Eitz, Ann Buck, and Brian Kaye.
Thank you, Michael. A civil lawsuit was filed on behalf of the 9 families yesterday, April 16th, 2025, in Cook County, Illinois, and demands a trial by jury in all 9 cases. Defendants in the complaint include Arlington Heights School District 25, former Westgate Elementary School nurse Tory Eitz, Principal Ann Buck, and then Assistant Superintendent, now Superintendent Brian Kaye. Plaintiffs are named as John and Jane Doe on behalf of Child Doe in each complaint to protect the families and their anonymity and to protect their medical histories. The families are represented by myself, Romanucci and Blandin partner Michael Holden that you just spoke with, and partner Gina Devoni. As to Nurse Tory Eitz, the following claims have been made: willful and wanton failure to report, negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud and forgery, and violations of the Family Medical Expense Act. The harm done to each of these children is very real, and it is impossible to yet assess the long-term impacts of Nurse Eitz's actions. As these people grow into young adults and adults, only then will the full impact of these actions be found. Keep in mind that before any manipulation of their medication, each of these children had special health conditions that they were dealing with during the school day. The manipulation of their medication, the missing of their medication, and the swapping of their medication had profound impacts on their learning environment and their home environment. These elementary school children face an uphill battle navigating their own health care and their own interpersonal relationships. Separately, on October 1st of 2024, the state of Illinois filed a 13-count criminal indictment against Tory Eitz for the actions she took related to this case. The criminal case is still pending, and the next status hearing is at the Rolling Meadows Courthouse on May 5th at 9:30 in courtroom 110. The plaintiff families all unanimously agree that Nurse Eitz should be held both civilly and criminally liable for her actions. They call on the state attorney's office to fully hold Nurse Eitz accountable and include jail time for her actions. To recap, the criminal charges include 1 count of official misconduct by a public employee, 5 counts of forgery, including for allegedly documenting the initials of parents, signifying that they had picked up medication from school when in fact they had not, and 7 counts of causing a child to be endangered for failing to properly secure and maintain prescription medication. While the actions of Nurse Eitz are abhorrent, it is also to keep in mind that the actions taken by Arlington Heights School District 25 and their leadership was just as awful. In the lawsuit that we have filed yesterday on behalf of the 9 families, the following actions have been filed against the district and/or their employees: willful and wanton conduct against Arlington Heights School District 25, negligence against Arlington Heights School District 25, willful and wanton retention of Nurse Eitz against Arlington Heights School District 25, negligent retention for the retention of Tory Eitz against the school district, willful and wanton failure to report against Ann Buck, negligent failure to report against Ann Buck, willful and wanton failure to report against Brian Kaye, and lastly, negligent failure to report against Brian Kaye. The reckless and intentional decisions made by Arlington Heights School District 25, Principal Ann Buck, and then Assistant Superintendent Brian Kaye clearly violated their duty to supervise Nurse Tory Eitz. They were aware of missing medication and parents' concerns as early as November 2021, including written communications in May and June of 2022 that should have been reason enough to conduct an internal investigation and or terminate her access to dispensing medication to children. The notice of concern also should have been a catalyst to report Tory Eitz to the Illinois Department of Children and Families as is mandated under Illinois law. All parties at Arlington Heights School District that have been named in this complaint are mandatory reporters and have a legal duty to report concerns to DCFS, which they failed to do. All parties that have been named in this lawsuit share responsibility for this tragic occurrence, and we seek to hold them all accountable in the civil courts. We will now open it up to questions from the press.
Hi, I'm Victor with WGN. Thank you guys for being here today. I want to talk a bit about the first correspondence in 2021 up to the report that the Arlington Heights Police Department received. I mean, this is, from what you guys are saying, extensive amount of time, over 2-3 years. Could you guys just talk a bit about the length of time?
Sure. I'll walk over here so I can both answer.
Yeah.
So the district first received notice that there was irregularities in Nurse Eitz tracking of medication in November of 2021. And it wasn't until that we have evidence of thus far, it could go back earlier. It wasn't until April of 2024 that the Arlington Heights Police Department was notified after it became apparent within the school that not only were the meds counts off, but when they checked the bottles for several students, they contained medications that weren't prescribed, such as aspirin, when they should have had the prescription medication primarily to treat ADHD.
I also just want to ask about the FOIA request. You guys mentioned you stonewalled trying to get this information. Is that how you ultimately got these texts, or where did these text messages come from?
Some of these text messages came from our clients. Some of them were communications with the families directly from the school. We did get, after the Illinois AG's office got involved, we did get some compliance, but certainly not full compliance from the school district for our request for information. We expect now with the lawsuits filed that they will have no other choice but to turn over the information requested.
My last question, I understand the superintendent is still in his role. Do we know if Ann Buck is still a principal?
She is still the principal at Westgate, I believe.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I've got basically a package of about 3 questions. Hopefully you guys have something on it. The first one would be, has there been any indication of intent on why the former nurse may have been taking these medications, selling or personal use, anything else like that?
Because the criminal case is still ongoing, a lot of it would be speculative, but it is apparent from the actions taken by Nurse Eitz that all of this conduct was intentional, that she was taking it either for personal use or for distribution. But I believe that information and a final determination on that will come out through the criminal case as that proceeds.
All right. And then just to get to focus on some of the real and emotional impacts as well, can either one of you riff just a little bit about the impacts of a child having their medication not being administered to them as suggested by a doctor? When I say that, ultimately it seems like the doctor had prescribed medication for these children. They weren't getting the results that a child should be getting if the medication is working properly in the dosage that's been prescribed. And so then there's steps taken
Sure.
further to try to.
So unfortunately, what each of these 9 families had to deal with was they'd start their child on a prescription managed by a doctor to treat mental health condition. And initially they would get good results. Child's behaviors would improve. They would do better in school. But inevitably, what they would see is that while the child was in school and being administered medication by Tory Eitz, that those behaviors began to return. Their grades started to drop. And the conclusion from the family, because they assumed the medications were being given appropriately, was that the meds were wearing off. When in reality, Nurse Eitz taking the medication made it so these children were not receiving the medication. The behaviors and difficulties returned because they were not receiving the medication. And ultimately, they go back to the doctor, the medication dose is increased, and that cycle starts over and over again. We had one family who noticed that their child's behaviors increased, um, that their child was doing worse in school, and they went on a family vacation. And over the course of the family vacation, they were the ones administering medication. And they saw that from day one until the end of the vacation, the behaviors began to correct themselves. She was bruising for unexplained reasons earlier. We now suspect that's due to the aspirin, but the bruising had resolved by the end of the vacation. So there's circumstantial evidence that all of these difficulties that these children have wasn't because of change in their condition, but was because Eitz was actively taking their medication and not administering the appropriate amount.
Okay. And just a offshoot of that, are all of the children involved in these civil lawsuits, um, were they experiencing or were they being medicated for behavioral concerns?
It was primarily ADHD and mental conditions associated with ADHD.
And then the last question I've got for you, just if you've got any riffing you can do on, in my mind, I hear the nurse calling a parent midday and saying, I need more medication to give to your child. Talk a little bit about that situation.
Sure. So what we've found in emails and text messages that we did recover from various sources is that on numerous occasions, nurse sites would either email or text parents and report that some of their children's pills had either fallen on the floor and been destroyed, had been miscounted, or were otherwise disposed of, and that she needed replacements. In every case, it seemed like an innocuous request. In the aggregate, you can see it as a pattern and practice of manipulating parents to bring additional medication into school. So, in an isolated instance, it may not raise any concerns with an individual parent on a one-time request. Everyone understands that sometimes medication can be lost. But when you look at it in the totality, it was clearly a pattern and practice of Toryites to manipulate parents to bring additional medication to school with a variety of excuses as to why there was missing medication.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to elaborate a little further on Mike, is as part of the investigation, we compared the attendance records of each of these students to their medication administration records. And there are numerous occasions where the student was noted as absent in the attendance records, but the medication administration records indicate that Tory Eitz claims to have administered a pill that day. So couple the dropped or spilled medication with all the times that she just took medication because the student wasn't there that day, and it adds up over time.
Follow up on this very question, Ms. Williams, I know there was swapping medication, maybe aspirin, that's a thing. I know obviously the kids are very young. Is there just any indication that maybe they noticed that the pills looked a little larger, or small, or different in color, anything of that sort?
Yeah, understanding that we're dealing with elementary age school students, um, the recognition by the students wasn't always there. There is one instance of one child who Nurse Eitz came to the lunchroom to administer the pill. He had a chewable form of his prescription medication. She gave him aspirin and told him to chew it, and he commented how it tasted awful, and she gave him a glass of water. But that child didn't know any better to report that to parents or teachers or anyone else.
How frustrated are these parents that these people are still in nice positions?
Extremely. I think these parents, more than anything with these lawsuits, is they want the district to be accountable, and more specifically, they want each of the individuals who allowed Eitz and enabled Eitz to do this to be held accountable.
Mike, can I ask you to just talk a bit further about what you have heard the kids' experience in school is without their medication? Many were taken out of the classroom, disciplined, embarrassed, they missed lessons. What does that do to the child?
Yeah, so unfortunately, many of these children, it's not just the drop in grades or the change in behaviors, but it's the peer-to-peer relationship. And off the meds, the behaviors increased, and they get pinned as the annoying kid or the weird kid. They get made fun of, so their emotional, social status within the school is greatly impacted, and that heightens their anxiety with going to school. It makes school much more miserable for them to be at. And all of this was something that was intended to be controlled through the medication that was being prescribed by the doctors. Uh, but the opportunity for these children to have some normalization of their school life was taken away by Eitz.
Thank you. I think that'll wrap us up for today. Appreciate you being here. If you do have any questions, be sure to send me an email at press@rvlaw.net.